and this is for Corey. So in honor of Corey.
I like this move.
The last time the Miami Dolphins won a playoff game, Bert,
Yes.
the New York Knicks were the Eastern Conference champions.
Ooh.
The last time Miami Dolphins won a playoff game, Bert, Tom Brady hadn't even been drafted yet. Bert, this one's for us, showing our age here.
Jesus.
The last time the Miami Dolphins won a playoff game, Metallica filed a lawsuit against.
Oh no, Napster.
Napster.
And Sean Parker.
The last time the Miami Dolphins won a playoff game, Bill Belichick was in his first season as the head coach of the New England Patriots.
Drew Bledsoe as a quarterback, probably.
The last time, I'm not sure about that. Maybe. The last time the Miami Dolphins won a playoff game, the Houston Texans didn't exist. And Bert, finally, the last time the Miami Dolphins won a playoff game, Sony released the PlayStation 2.
Wow.
So, in honor of the Miami Dolphins losing yet again, playing their theme song. And that concludes zero Dark Corey. We're friends now again.
Yeah. Great regular season.
Yeah. I mean, listen, in all seriousness, Miami had, I think by any metric, had a great season. Obviously, the expectations, it's not their fault that the media hyped them up. It's not, going on Hard Knocks obviously helps, I guess doesn't help their case, but they had a good season. Tua had a really good season. So that brings us to some things around the NFL and yet another collapse from Tua, from Miami. Now, it is stated that the general manager does want to keep Tua long-term, but...
Yeah. I mean, he's been saying that for years, though.
Right. So, but we're not going to say will he or won't he, Bert. Should the Miami Dolphins move on from Tua?
No. So I don't... if you go to this stuff about sports sample size, the 3-year sample size, we had come into the season saying, particularly after Tua's brain went to mush last year after that horrible hit, but we had sit here and said, this year is a make or break year for Tua to see what he can do. And he had a great season. He absolutely did. I think where it falls off is game management. And that's something that can easily be learned. Look, a lot of people are going to dog him on his arm. I honestly think what he showed from an improvement standpoint this year is that he's able to get the job done, and he's able to give the football team confidence knowing that he's under center. So I think it's not a Tua issue as it is perhaps maybe getting the other right pieces in from a coaching standpoint, not necessarily moving on from Mike McDaniel, but what other, pieces do you need on that staff to really elevate his game even more and just elevate the Dolphins even more?
So earlier today, I would have said yes. Like, he isn't a game changer. He is a game manager. And I think that Mike McDaniel's style requires somebody who can improvise, who can make plays. You have the weapons to do so with Tyreek and Waddle and Achane. Like, those guys can, once things are out of rhythm, it works great when they're in rhythm because they're fast and you can, but as you've seen, when teams learn to disrupt that, you need a guy that can help extend the play. And then now their speed becomes an asset. They can break away from the play, but if Tua is too slow to process what's happening and then make the throw because his rhythm is out, that doesn't help Miami, especially when they get to cold weather environments, especially when they get to teams that can kind of not maybe match their speed. And I will say that injuries probably hurt them, in a sense, but it doesn't change the fact that Tua has shown again that when it comes to playoff time, much like Dak, there's a switch there. And I don't know what it is, but this is the time of year where you need a guy like Patrick Mahomes, where you need a guy like CJ Stroud, where you need a guy like Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen, who just, rips off a 50-yard run because he needs to do it, not throws the ball, somewhere in the vicinity of somewhere and hopes that the receiver catches it. You need a guy that can, excuse me, take over that game. So we'll see with if they, next year if they can get through the season without any injuries, maybe it'll be a different story. But as
Yeah.
far, I think they should move on from him simply because your window is short. These windows are getting smaller in the NFL, and I think you've had enough time with him to show that he just can't. He just doesn't match the pieces around. I don't think that's not me saying he's a bad quarterback. I just think he's bad fit for Miami. Oh, you got anything for that?
I mean, so the only thing I'll say is, when you look at Tua's when he was first starting out and trying to be a little bit more mobile, that's what got him in trouble, and that's what got him his injuries in itself. So the only thing I can think of is that they obviously tried to pull him back and get him the weapons to kind of help scramble for him. But to your point about not seeing those reads earlier and making the right choices, even mentally within the pocket, I tend to agree with you on that one. And knowing that's obviously what's going to be the biggest detriment. And it's not that he's not a playmaker. I think he's still adjusting because his old style of making a play, if he didn't have the right read on anything, was for him scrambling out of the pocket, and that's exactly what he did to take on those hits. And that one hit that, oh man, I'll never forget that one hit he had last year that made his fingers all go different directions and shit. You just
throwing
knew he
up
was
gang signs. Yeah,
fucking out of it. Yeah.
The problem is the contract is up, and I guess that kind of also went into my thinking. It's like, do you trust this guy to give him some type of extension and kind of be married to him? And I feel I've seen enough of him to realize I can get pretty much competent or comparable play from a rookie. Like we've seen it. Like we've seen these rookies, and you have talented guys like Drake May, Michael Penix. Obviously you can't get like a Caleb Williams or anything like that, but there's talented quarterbacks coming out in a pretty deep quarterback class. And I don't see anything from Tua that tells me, or even another just player out in the NFL, like that can come in and do it.
Like what? Russell Wilson?
Maybe Russell Wilson would be perfect for Miami. It's funny you said that. I think Russell Wilson would be perfect for Miami. Dwayne Marcus suggested that Russell Wilson may be a perfect fit for Pittsburgh. That's another good one.
Russell Wilson would be
something like that. That Russell Wilson is a good one for Miami. So Bert, we just talked about the Cowboys and we talked about the Eagles. Whose loss was worse in your eyes?
Man, I watched both games, and I gotta say, I mean, I'm inclined to go with the Cowboys only because they had home field advantage.
Yeah.
And to the point where I was shocked to still see Cowboy fans in the stands, because even in the third quarter, like, look, Dallas got the ball back at the half, and had they done something with it on that first drive, they were what, maybe 2 possessions away from making it competitive. So they could have really had a comeback, but man, as soon as that third quarter was up and knowing that the pack was still up like that, I was shocked to see fans in there. But they had a home field advantage. I think that's probably why I'm going to say that they were the worst, despite the Eagles having an absolutely abysmal game, their defense getting picked apart, the amount of times they missed tackles. But you have to give more credit to Baker Mayfield because he put on a show. And again, his receivers were dropping passes. Not that Jordan Love wasn't making plays. I just think Baker played better than Jordan Love did, given the circumstances. So I'm going to say that the Cowboys had a worse loss. How do you go in with home field advantage and get absolutely embarrassed like that? And look, nothing against the Packers. They played a phenomenal game. And like, that's why we watch football. We're talking about me, a Giant fan who has watched a wild card team in Eli Manning's Giants in 2007 march, but basically do the same thing the Packers just did, march through Dallas, embarrass them, and then move on from that point forward to win a Super Bowl. So the Pack could be on the same exact trajectory, but the Cowboys for me have the worst loss this weekend.
Yeah. Now, and I said it in the Good, Bad, Fugly segment that I do believe that the Cowboys, simply because they were home and simply because we kind of saw the Eagles bleed out in the final half of the season, even though it was still it's it's weird. The Eagles collapse is somehow shocking and also not shocking at the same time, right?
Yeah.
Like,
because we have to give them grace, like, right? Like, so there were, let's say, out of the 5 games, there were 2 that we were like, all right, they could have lost, right? I mean,
Yeah.
dropping the last one against the Giants. I mean, the Giants came out to make a statement and I guess make sure that they didn't get home field advantage. But to that, they did drop what was it? A game against was it Arizona?
Yep.
Yeah.
Arizona embarrassed
So
them.
so it's one of those things where like, all right, the end of the season, I think we just gave them grace knowing that for the first part of the season, we're like, all right, they're a really good team. And all right, they're winding down. Hey, maybe they just hit really, really string of bad luck and then they're going to jump right to it. So yeah, that's the best way to describe it. Like we're kind of surprised, but we're kind of not. But I think it's because they started out so hot and kept it going until the last 5 weeks that we were like, okay, like I guess, maybe they'll turn it around in the playoffs. So I'm with you on that. That's weird, man.
Yeah. So let's go to the Cowboys.
Mm,
What do they do? Okay. Like
mhm.
Jerry Jones clearly upset. The Cowboys, again, not shocking because they've been through this before the last couple of years, and it seems
Yeah.
they're finding new and creative ways to just get worse
Yeah.
or have their outlook get worse every year. Dak is up for an extension and up to be probably the highest paid player in NFL history because that's just the way these things work, especially at the
Yeah.
quarterback position. Mike McCarthy, they won the division. You know what I mean? Like he's winning football games. Like these
Yeah.
12-win seasons keep piling up for him. It's just, do I put all the Cowboy struggles on him? I don't know. What does Dallas do with McCarthy and Prescott? Do they get rid of McCarthy? Do they just get rid of Prescott? Do they get rid of both, or do they just run it back? Like, what do you think they're gonna do?
I mean, you kind of they're in a tough situation, right? Because they're winning games. They're just not winning the game, like the big games, the ones that matter. You can't take away a 12-win season, and a division win. So I honestly think they have to run it back.
Yeah.
But you really have no other choice. Now I know, I mean, Jerry demands excellence. He does, but there's really no other signs to point and say, "Hey, I think we need to move on." I don't think they move on from Dak. If they move on from Dak, I almost think that's foolish to a sense because you can sit here and argue that Dak is actually a top 5 quarterback in today's NFL.
Yeah.
You can argue it. I'm not going to be the one to make that argument, but you can argue it.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think you move on from Dak. If you do move on from Dak, there's another team out there that's going to scoop him up, and ultimately he's going to make that team better. He is a good quarterback, to say the least. But I really want McCarthy to be a problem. I do. I don't like him. I don't.
Yeah.
I've never have. Even when he was back with the Packers, I didn't like him either.
Yeah.
But they have to run it back. They have to give him another shot. And here's why. When you look at that division, your only real threat as of right now is the Eagles. And after their abysmal collapse, I mean, what is management in Philly going to do with Nick Sirianni? And this has been a question too, because they're just as eager as Jerry and the Cowboys are. But when you look at the Giants, still somewhat in rebuild mode. I mean, Danny Dimes hopefully coming back, and you have Dable and wanting to sync with Danny Dimes going into next year, which is a make or break season for both of them.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have, the Commanders, who are now again without a head coach after firing Ron Rivera, which he definitely overstayed his welcome. So you figure when you're looking in the division, you obviously have prime to think, well, if we run it back, we could take the division again. And we're still a relatively good football team. So let's see what happens next year and go from there.
So I think I'm inclined to agree with you about running it back because simply there's not much better options no matter which way you go. And so, listen, I get it. Jerry Jones hasn't been this upset since the civil rights movement was passed. So yes, the Harbaugh thing's out there. Do I think
Yeah.
that that's a fit? Do I think Belichick's a fit? And we're going to get to that in a minute.
Mm-hmm.
As far as quarterbacks go, Kirk Cousins, I think Kirk Cousins and Dak are interchangeable. Yeah, maybe Kirk Cousins is a little bit better thrower of the football, but Dak's a better athlete. So it's like, I like Kirk Cousins more than Dak. I think the Cowboys would be better than Kirk Cousins, but I'm not going to act like there's some huge gap. Like that's the missing piece.
Mm-hmm.
I think they'll be largely the same. It's just, maybe they'll win an extra game. Maybe they'll lose an extra game. I don't know. I know that they're close. And so, not close enough for me because you're going to have to pay one of them. And so is the price going to be, yeah, we got to make Dak the highest paid player of all time because that's the way the market is right now? Unfortunately, that's the pill you have to swallow.
That's the reality of
So,
the NFL right now, right? But
yeah,
you're also talking about a quarterback now. Now, granted, we know of Dak he's always been kind of a turnover machine because he throws the ball a lot, right? But he threw for 4,500 yards this year, 36 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. He has additional 2 rushing touchdowns with about 240 rushing. So, I mean, all in all, you look at his numbers, good, serviceable quarterback. And like I said, and I mean, when you're in the division you're in, knowing that you're going to play the Giants twice, the Commanders twice, the Eagles twice, and they had luck with the Eagles this year. I think they split. Yeah, they split with them. They beat them and then lost. I mean, I think you have to stick with it. You have to run it back. You're gonna have to pay Dak, but the good thing is you pay Dak. You know Dak's going to perform. They're the Cowboys. You can get another coach in there.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with you. So, Bert, on to the other NFC's team, the Eagles. So we've been kind of talking about it all show.
Yeah.
Just a slow death. Finally, Baker Mayfield and the Bucs took Old Yeller to the back, put a bullet in its head. So what happened? What happened to the Philadelphia Eagles? Because they started 10-1. Then all of a sudden, they lose a couple games. They get rid of both their coordinators. Got Matt Patricia calling plays.
Yeah.
You know, some injuries. You know, maybe Jalen Hurts is a little more hurt than he did. Interesting.
I mean, AJ
Brown kind of derailing the team, kind of nuking the team a little bit with some of his off the field stuff. Like there's something going on with that team that nobody's talking about. And I think Nick Sirianni, who everybody also, I don't understand. What are you firing Nick Sirianni for? You guys were in the Super Bowl last year. You started the season 10-1. Nick Sirianni didn't fire your coordinators and replace them mid-season. Nick Sirianni wasn't out there hunting for linebackers and safeties middle of the season, trying to change the roster. Mm-hmm. The Philadelphia Eagles have a history of getting rid of good coaches.
Yeah.
What is the constant when it comes to the Philadelphia Eagles? It's Howie Roseman. It's Jeffrey Lurie making knee-jerk kind of, rushing to decisions, making bad decisions. Okay? Got rid of Doug Peterson.
Quickly got rid of Doug Peterson after bringing their franchise their first ever Super Bowl. Yeah.
So careful what you wish for, Eagles fans. I mean, seriously, and so interesting note out of that Buccaneers game, one of the defensive coaches for the Bucs got caught on a microphone saying, "Hey, make Jalen Hurts move around. He can't read defenses. He's going to make a mistake. That's what he does. He's not that good." And I think I got in trouble before because I kind of mentioned that earlier last year with the Eagles, and I kind of felt dumb, got made to feel dumb because they made it to a Super Bowl. And I said, yeah, Jalen Hurts was playing really well. I get it. He was hot. Like Cam Newton also won the MVP for 1 year and then had a bunch of 7 and 9 seasons. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you just
the Super Bowl 1 year.
One year. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then after that. So is Jalen Hurts the new Cam Newton? We'll find out. Maybe this was a bad year. Maybe he had some mystery injury that nobody knows about. And next year he's going to be
aside from a dislocated finger. That looked nasty as shit.
It looked super nasty. Yeah. So, but to fire the coach seems like lashing out, like a fan lashing out because they can't explain why they went from 10-1 to getting embarrassed by Baker Mayfield. What do you think?
That's exactly what it is, though. And when you look at last season too, and the trip to the Super Bowl and them going in to be a very favorite to return, right? Because not much had changed with their offense in itself. And look, you can sit here and it's been evident at least the last 2 weeks of the regular season that Jalen Hurts was not himself. And then when you have AJ Brown go out to a knee injury, and you're right, be that distraction off the field, basically deleting everything Eagles related on his social media and being a distraction, combined with an absolute, I said this earlier in the show, what appeared to be a coaching meltdown for being either ill-prepared and surprised by the Bucs. And what did I read this? Like, the Bucs had the third best rushing defense or something like that. And then the Eagles basically acting surprised when, they were gunning for Jalen from the get-go and making him actually, like you said, trying to make him move around and be able to read the defense better too. So I think the reason that they're calling for firing Nick Sirianni because they want results now. They feel as though
Yeah.
now is their time to strike, and that's what's going to happen. And like you mentioned, they have a history of moving on from good coaches. And I mean, I don't think it will happen. A part of me hopes not when I have my football glasses on and not just my Giant fan glasses, because he is a good coach. But I mean, shit, if they part ways with him, I mean, give a good look for Nick Sirianni, because he's a very, very good coach. But they just had an absolute meltdown to the point where it looked like they were ill prepared and they weren't ready for what Baker and the Bucks had for them.
So if they fire Nick Sirianni, there's another guy out there that fans are clamoring for.
Yeah.
And his name is Bill Belichick.
Yes, sir.
So he had an interview with the Atlanta Falcons, and they made it was such a big deal to them that they made a post about it, or they released a statement about it. That seems odd to do for just an interview. But it's the Atlanta Falcons, so you got to take the wins when they come.
Yeah.
So pick a team, Bert. Where should Bill Belichick go? Let's say all the teams that have some type of coaching issue do fire their head coaches. Let's just we can pretend here, because I don't know where Bill Belichick's going to land, but where do you think he's going to go, or where do you think he should go? Would be the best place for him.
The best place for Bill to get, now look, he's how many wins away from setting the record, right?
14.
Initially, so he's 14. So depending on where he goes, it'll be hard to do it this next year. So we're looking at least 2 years. But you want to give yourself the best shot to do so. And when I think about prime Bill Belichick, I think about a guy who's able to have a quarterback with a good arm, who's got a good football IQ, as well as solid receivers and a good defense too. The biggest name out there that just calls to me, believe it or not, is the Chargers. It's hard for me to look, and you can say the Titans, but another team with a quarterback identity crisis. Commanders, I don't know if you'd want to go there. I mean, take your pick. The Seahawks too. Like I get it. I mean, Pete Carroll's out. Even like the Falcons, the Raiders. Personally, I like Antonio Pierce. I would like him to stay with the Raiders, or at least get a head coaching job elsewhere too. And then God knows nobody wants to go to the Panthers. So I don't understand why you wouldn't want to go to the Chargers, and knowing that the QB that's there has an arm. He's an established QB. He's workable. Division difficulty isn't that bad. And it gives him the biggest shot to reach that 15th win in a matter of 2 years. And from a pressure standpoint, I mean, you're Bill Belichick. And not only did they clear house from a coaching standpoint, but also management too. So whoever they bring in there, they can bring somebody in who's complimentary, who can work with Bill on that level. And he's always had really good relationships with management. Of course, I mean, his longest tenure now is working for the better part of 2 decades for one guy. So, I mean, when you look at his relationship with ownership and management, that's the exact guy you want in the Chargers organization. And honestly, inheriting one of the best shots to reach his goal, but also make the Chargers a real Super Bowl contender in the coming years.
So, Bert, when I thought about this, there is only one answer, but there's some steps to it. There's some layers. So bear with me.
Oh, no, not the music. Here we go.
So we had an interview with Atlanta, and I found that very interesting that he did this interview first, because it's not the team. The Chargers seem like the most obvious team to do this, to have this interview first. You know, Bert, when you go to the store and you pick up something, the first thing you pick up is the thing that you most desire, right? Like it's the thing that catches your eye out of everything in the store. You may not buy it, you may put it back down, but something about it, caught your eye where you chose that specific item, okay? So Bill Belichick chose Atlanta for one reason. And it said that he wants to go somewhere with a veteran quarterback and an underachieving team. We already said it. Bill Belichick is 14 wins away. The Atlanta Falcons are in probably the worst division in football, no?
Fair, yeah. We've said it all season.
Now, outside of the quarterback, they're a really good team. Bijan Robinson, they have good weapons with Drake London, the tight end, Kyle Pitts, really good defense this year. They were missing the quarterback. So how does that fit what Bill Belichick said? That's what I'm talking about. Oh, no. Who is a quarterback that's available, that's a veteran, that's underachieved?
Take your
We
pick,
talked
man.
about him earlier.
Did
His
we?
name is Kirk
Oh,
Cousins.
Kirk Cousins.
Now, Kirk Cousins to Atlanta, even though he's going to be a free agent, how does
Mhm.
that make sense? I did some digging, Bert, and guess what I found out? Kirk Cousins' wife is from Kirk Cousins and his wife got married in
Makes sense if she's from there, yeah.
their entire family lives in Bill Belichick's in his mid-70s. He's done with the Bailey Zappi, Mac Jones nonsense.
Mm-hmm.
Kirk Cousins in Atlanta makes tons of sense.
Mm-hmm.
You get Bill Belichick in there. You're in a weak division. You can get those 14 wins pretty quick, as early as next year, possibly. Because
You think Atlanta's going to go 14 and 4?
with Bill Belichick and the
14-3?
weapons they have, and a competent veteran quarterback in Kirk Cousins, I think Cousins and Belichick is a match made in heaven. Kirk Cousins is closer to Tom Brady, or at least a Tom Brady model, than Bailey Zappi or Mac Jones is, right?
Yeah.
Like at least we know Kirk Cousins can throw the ball. So yeah, 100%, and it makes sense financially for Atlanta. They're in a dome, control the variables.
Mm-hmm.
Most of their teams are in warm weather, so you don't have to deal. Bill Belichick doesn't want to have to deal with the snow, right?
Mm-hmm.
Outside of Charlotte, they can get some cold weather, but going down to Tampa doesn't seem like a bad idea. You know what I mean? So New Orleans is in a dome. You get to see all these optimal conditions. Again, a lot of these teams, these are bottom feeding teams. The only team is Tampa Bay you kind of really have to contend with in the division, and their future's in doubt because we don't know if they're going to keep Baker around long term. So watch out for Kirk Cousins and Bill Belichick in Atlanta, because I think it makes a ton of sense, not only for Bill Belichick's legacy, but for the Atlanta Falcons, who need a quarterback anyway, and one who can be a top end quarterback in the league, and who's going to be available. And that type of combination doesn't come around that often. So just look out for that.